Yeah, that's a huge part of it. So managing the VOCs, having some sort of strategy in place that you can't always eliminate all VOCs, but having maybe a plant strategy which might help to mop up some of the pollutants, and balancing your material choices as well, so that overall the numbers are lower.
So like a wellness interiors theme, I just love that. And I love that it's called wellness, so cool. You're going to talk to us about some new designs and I know you have presentations. I'd love to just like for you to chat us through and we can have a conversation about it. Let's start with Biophilic Design.
Okay, so I'll start off here. So there was a really famous study in the 80s in Sweden, and people were shown images subliminally of snakes and spiders, but also of frayed electric wires and handguns. And what was amazing about this study is that the people responded more subversely to the natural elements, the snakes and the spiders, and not the handguns and wires. So this really shows to us that nature's ingrained in us. We are part of it, we can't survive without it. And we've spent 97% of our evolution living in nature. And it's only recently that we moved indoors, and our brains and our nervous systems haven't caught up yet. So we process around 74 gigabytes of information every day, and that's equivalent to 16 movies. And so the brain's overworked and it's exhausted. And so that is kind of why we look at using biophilic design to manage, to bring down our stress levels. I had a few little notes here. Okay, we just seemed to forget something there. Because actually, side of this is quite interesting. I don't know if anyone's heard of the studies of forest medicine and forest bathing in Japan. And there was a guy called Dr. Quinn Lee who's been studying this for about 30 years. And he discovered that if you bring people into a forest and they spend, a day or 2 days in forest space, that especially for women, that their stress levels drop by 50% after a day and 75% after 2 days. Men, sadly, their stress levels drop by 30% after a day and 35% after 2 days. But another way of measuring your immune system is by looking at the activity of your NK cells. So these are your natural killer cells. They're a type of white blood cell. And he measured after 3 days and 2 days spent living in a forest that the NK cell activity had increased by 53%. So, the proof is in the pudding. We are absolutely dependent on nature for our health and well-being. And we did leave it out of our buildings for the last 20, 30 decades, 20, 30 years at least. And so now really it's time to start to reintroduce it. So there's been studies then over the last 30 years on biophilia. So biophilia means a love of life or a love of living things. And all of these studies have led to the emergence of biophilic design. And what they discovered was that in environments or interactions with nature that there was increased academic scores in schools, there was less absenteeism in schools, they increased the natural light and the natural materials. In offices, they found that creativity increased by, I think it was about 15%, performance increased, stress decreased, so absenteeism decreased. Stress is one of the biggest reasons for long-term absenteeism in Ireland and the UK. So, the return on investment putting biophilic design into offices is huge if you're going to manage your absenteeism. They also discovered, and this was sort of the milestone for biophilic design, was a hospital study by Roger Ulrich in 1984. And he tested two sides of a corridor in a hospital. On one side, the rooms all had a view of nothing really, a wall. On the other side, all the rooms had a view of nature, of trees. And the patients in each of the rooms had had the same operation. They'd all had their gallbladder removed. And all the patients on the side with the view of the nature left nearly a day earlier and required less pain meds than all of the guys down the corridor. Nothing, but they could see nothing. So it's very telling.
That just goes to show you, we've always heard that we should try to bring the outdoors indoors, but how many is there in that case? This is the as well, scientifically, it does make such a difference. It's amazing.
Oh, it's huge, and lots of science about this now. And so much so, all of the big tech companies, all the big tech companies, Google and Salesforce, and they all have biophilic consultants on their full-time staff. So if they know it, we should all be using it.
They're making sure their staff are happy, healthy.
Well, that's it. They want to keep their staff. So, if you take that the average lifespan in Ireland is around 82 years, and we know we spend 90 years indoors, That means we spend 74 years inside. That's either in our homes or in our offices or, in our school. And we spend 2/3 of our lives indoors in our homes, ours or somebody else's home. And of that, we spend half our time in our bedrooms. It's 24 years. So that means that the home is probably the most likely location or environment that we have that has the biggest impact on our health and well-being. And it's also the one area that has been less studied, less research. So much research is on schools and hospitals, but not on homes, sadly. So we have to take the research from those areas to apply them into the homes. So when you're designing, so I've talked specific, this is actually a live project. I thought it might be interesting just to share how I'm approaching picking materials and finishes. So good biophilic design is about using what's local, taking inspiration from what's close to you, because culturally we have a different interpretation of nature with our very green country than somebody living in the Sahara might, different colour choices and so on. So on this project, I took photographs on the left-hand side. There was a lovely forest and a hill, and it was quite near the sea, and there was lots of granite and cones, and then picked colour scheme to go with that and materials. So what's interesting about colours, especially in biophilic realm, natural colour schemes generally are harmonious. So it means they're beside each other on the colour wheel. And the reason these are more restorative is because the brain doesn't have to work so hard from the transitions to each colour. So you enjoy the space. On the other hand, contrasting colours, for example, green and red, they're very energising because the brain has to work much harder. Yeah. So another thing you might look at is using natural forms in these spaces, because it's very expensive to build in curves, and there's nothing but straight edges in nature. So we got to work with what we got. You might look at curvy furniture, and curvy furniture have been shown to be perceived as more friendly. Very rigid straight lines perceived as being quite negative. And they've measured brain activity of people in rooms with boxy furniture versus curved furniture, and in curved furniture there's more brain activity.
Sorry, that's something that is so achievable. We can all use curvy chair or stool or something, and then we all can look at the windows, see what kind of colours that we can pull into our home. So it's not something that's totally far out. You're really coming back to the basics with your palette and what you implement into it.
Well, that's true. It's actually, it's easy to take inspiration from nature. This is so when it's, for example, if it's not achievable to buy curvy furniture or, to have a view from your room, use patterns, tiling layouts, materials. And this is an example of a bathroom I did for clients who were really bad in the mornings, and they needed kind of a wake-up call. So there's contrasting colours. And then I used a fractal wallpaper. And fractals are natural patterns that are found in nature, and they've been shown to reduce, when we use them in interiors, to reduce our stress levels by 60%, and then to improve our cognitive abilities and our memory. So when our stress levels drop, the brain can work harder doing other things. It's no longer scanning the environment for attack. It can focus inwardly. So fractals are wonderful to be able to use. And then wood. So wood is really interesting. There's been numerous studies about wood. If you clad a room with 75% wood, so that might be the ceiling and the four walls, your cortisol levels reduce considerably. And so this is a great product to use in a dental waiting room, for example, or I can see my cousin strangely in the background there. So it'd be great to use in a medical situation, for example.
Calm people down.
Calm people down. And so you wouldn't want to use it in an office when you're trying to get people to focus. And there's a great study in Slovakia in the National Oncology Unit, and they refurbed one of their waiting rooms, they clad it in timber furniture, and they measured, the neuroscientists measured the brain activity. And so in the first few minutes, they noticed that people sitting in the room, their stress levels, they started to feel more relaxed. But what was way more fascinating was in time, just like I mentioned before, is their brain activity increased, their memory improved, their ability to perform improved, while their nervousness and their anxiety dropped. So wood, when you touch it or see it, has enormous impact. And it's sustainable. It's a no-brainer. It's beautiful, sustainable, and anyway, we use more. And then of course plants. So everybody associates biophilic design with plants. There's a huge part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And NASA did a great study called the Clean Air Study in the 80s, where they determined which plants were best to use for mopping up pollutants in the air. And it's about 50 on them, and so you might have the palm or the Boston fern, which is great for getting rid of kitchen smells. Aloe vera, which is brilliant in your bedroom, it emits oxygen at night, so if you've got sinus issues, it makes it easy to breathe. The spider plant clears formaldehyde very effectively. So new wardrobes going in, you know the way you often have formaldehyde in the construction of the plywood or the particle board. And yeah, anyway, so all the plants of all they're different. You know, they clear benzene, all the nasties out here. Clutter. Right. 77% of people who live in a cluttered home are more likely to be overweight. It's not extraordinary. So there's been an awful lot of clutter studies. Another study in 2010 in UCLA looked at women who lived in cluttered homes. And they measured the impact of the clutter on their day. And by the end of the day, they had distributed, or they had exhibited the same cortisol patterns as people suffering from PTSD, and their mood had decreased. It's very heavy. And what happened? And the reason being is, actually, you're more likely to eat a bar chocolate than an apple in a cluttered space as well. So the brain gets knackered. It's called decision fatigue, and you're making all these micro decisions all day. And when you see clutter, it just overwhelms the brain because it's another thing it has to manage. And you get to a point that you can no longer make a good decision. So you reach for the chocolate bar and not the apple. So one of the easiest ways, really, if you're trying to make changes in your life, is start with decluttering. So clutter. And then sleep. So sleep is fascinating. The sleep guru is Matthew Walker. He's a neuroscientist in Berkeley. And he has reported that men who routinely sleep for under 5 hours per night have smaller testicles. And they also have less levels of testosterone than men 10 years they're older than them. So this has affected, lack of sleep has effectively aged them. Now they've seen similar studies in the female reproductive studies also. Another interesting thing actually about lack of sleep is because sleep manages our circadian rhythm, and equally our circadian rhythm manages our sleep. So if one goes out of whack, other things, it doesn't really work. Our hormones tell us whether we're tired or we're hungry or, time to go to sleep, time to wake up. And they've measured the hormone levels of people who don't get more than 5 or 6 hours sleep, that they have a lack of leptin, which is the appetite suppressant hormone, and way more ghrelin, which is the hormone that tells you that you're hungry. So we don't have a thing shutting off I need to eat. So if anyone's trying to lose weight, getting on top of your sleep actually is key. And so one of the rooms that you can make a lot of simple changes in to make a room easier to sleep is to get rid of all the clutter. You're trying to create what's called visual silence. So no clutter. I paint all the trims, the skirtings, the walls, the ceiling in one colour so that the eye isn't tired, as it moves around. Make a cave. I call it a sleep pod. And ideally, if you can move, even if the wardrobe's behind the bed, that where you're looking at, there's nothing to distract you. It should be about sleep. It really should be a TV and telephones. We all know that when they mess around with circadian rhythms. And interestingly enough, the ideal temperature to sleep in is between 16 and 18.5 degrees.
That's the optimal to actually cool down.
You see properly. So there you go. So that was sort of a quick, short introduction to restorative home design.
There was so much in that, but the main takeaways that I got were that, first of all, we've really come away from all the things that support us. Like,